giving the first fruits. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. He who asks a question may be a fool for 5 minutes. He who never asks a question remains a fool forever. It's okay to ask a question. Asking saves a lot of guesswork. I don't know about you, but in the old days, before we had our phones that could tell us exactly where to go everywhere, you would have a map, right? An atlas map. And you would try to use that, but at some point in time, you get into the city and you'd have to stop at a gas station and ask somebody, where is this place? I can't find it. And I hated to do that. Absolutely. I mean, it was almost like that was kind of unmanly in some ways to stop and ask. But pretty soon, soon enough, my wife would berate me enough that I would finally pull over and ask somebody where this is. So asking saves a lot of guesswork and a lot of time. Oh, I like this one. Do not have your concert first and tune your instruments later. Instruments are to be tuned first. In other words, begin the day with God. Tune your instrument before you go out for the day. And then the topic of quarrels. We don't use that word quarrels much anymore, but it means to fight, to have strife. Proverbs 17:14 says, the beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. Therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with. When we studied this a few weeks ago, I said that many commentators said this letting out water was like when a dam starts to breach and water starts leaking through. Before you know, the whole dam is gone. And I got to tell you, having a pond on our place, I can't tell you how many times I woke up in the middle of the night sweating, thinking, oh no, that dam's giving away. I don't know why I have a recurring dream about that dam giving way and water, but I do. And that can happen. It only takes a little bit of trickle going through that dam for it to happen. In quarreling, the truth is always lost. It takes two to quarrel, but only one can end it. Very often, a fight for what is right ends up in a fight for what is left. And usually nothing. Robert, this one's for you. Some husbands quarrel with their wives, and others have learned to say, yes, dear. If you remember before you got married, I sat you down and said, Robert, practice this. Yes, dear. I'm sorry, dear. I'm wrong, dear. It won't happen again, dear. Thank you, dear. Please forgive me, dear. Right? We went through that stuff. Have you learned them? Oh, okay. All right. Husband, you talk like an idiot. Wife, I have to talk so you can understand me. All right, let's don't quarrel. Verse 17 says, let not thine heart envy sinners. In other words, don't desire what they have, what they do. Don't approve, don't imitate what they do. But be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. And I think that for sure there's an end. For sure there's an afterlife. There's life after this. Matthew Henry said, the believer's expectation shall not be disappointed. The end of his trials and of the sinner's prosperity is at hand. We've talked about this more than once, how often you look at someone and like, man, they're living a wicked life and they're prospering, and I don't understand. I don't understand why they're not punished. And this says, for surely there is an end. In other words, God's judgment will be had. It says, let not thine heart envy sinners. This is an easy trap to fall into. On this side of eternity and the ultimate judgments of God, it may seem that sin is unpunished and righteousness is unrewarded. It may seem to us as we look at it, but that's not going to be the case. One day we'll say, oh, I think one of the most quoted phrases in heaven is going to be, of course. Right? Of course. Charles Bridges says, our hearts, instead of envying sinners, should be full of compassion for them, for they have nothing to look forward to but death. Puts a little different light on it. Instead of envying them for what maybe they've gotten in an ill-gotten way, we really should have compassion on them, because all they have to look forward to is their death, and after that, we know what happens. But be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. Instead of being jealous of the wicked, determined to have an eternal perspective rooted in the fear of God and active recognition of the greatness and righteousness of God. Now, in a sermon on this verse, here's what Charles Spurgeon had to say. That doesn't count as a cough or an by the way. He gave a wonderful definition of the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is a brief description for true religion. It's an inward condition, betokening hearty, you don't use that word very often anymore, betokening hearty submission to our Heavenly Father. It consists very much in a holy reverence of God and a sacred awe of Him. This is accompanied by a childlike trust in Him, which leads to loving obedience, tender submission, and lowly adoration. Charles Spurgeon always had a way of taking a section of the Bible and really expanding on it and making it where we could understand it. So this phrase, for surely there is an end, I think that's talking about the afterlife, and there's going to be an eternity. Things are going to settle out at that point in time, and we're going to see that it's settled out. In this life, if this life was all there would be, then we would have much more reason to envy sinners. Yet, as the conclusion of the book of Ecclesiastes demonstrates, surely there is a hereafter, and therefore wisdom means that we should live in the fear of the Lord. This is the way Ecclesiastes ends. Three very powerful verses. It says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So surely there is an end. Verse 19, 20, and 21. Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way. Be not among winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh. For the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. So Solomon, as he's done many times in this book, remember the first 9 chapters were basically him giving treatises to his son, and he quite often said, hey, be alert, my son, listen, pay attention. That's what he's saying here. Hear thou, my son, and be wise. And this is wise instruction and guidance of a father to his children. And he says, be not among the winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh. The wise counsel to a son or daughter is that they should not mix with those who overindulge in alcohol or food. The drunk and the glutton have a bad future, poverty and rags. And the wise man or woman will not share it with them. Alan P. Ross said the drunkard and the glutton represent the epitome for the lack of discipline. And when you think about the lack of discipline in the Bible, another word that's used, particularly in the New Testament, is the word temperance, talking about having self-control. And self-control really means letting the Spirit take control instead of following passions that we should not. And Galatians chapter 5, I think, has a lot to say about this area, and even talks about the fruit of the Spirit and the fact that temperance is one of those fruit of the spirits. First of all, it gives the works of the flesh. It says, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murderers, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. I think this drunkenness and revelings is direct relation to our verse here. Of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. And then he contrasts that with the fruit of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and then the key word, temperance. Against such there is no law. And then in verse 22, Solomon returns to this theme of honoring your father and your mother. He says, hearken unto thy father that beget thee, listen to him, in other words, and despise not thy mother when she is old. You know, as we're getting old, that's good to hear, that we're not to be despised as we get old. Hearken unto thy father that beget thee. Wisdom can never be learned until the attention is won. There must be a deliberate effort to listen. The first part of learning is listening. And then despise not thy mother when she is old. This affirms the principle of honor your father and mother. This is found in both Exodus chapter 20, of course, and the Ten Commandments, and then also in Ephesians chapter 6. When parents become old, they should receive special attention and care. Verse 23 is kind of a unique verse in that it says, buy the truth. Buy the truth and sell it not. In other words, hey, it's not a free market to buy and sell. There's only one side of this market, and that's buy. Buy all you can, never sell any. If it goes on sale, buy it. If it's expensive, buy it. No matter what, buy it. Just buy the truth, never sell it. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding. Do everything you can to gain it. Give up whatever cost it takes to get these things. We should have the mentality that we are willing to gain truth and wisdom and gain it at any cost instead of wanting to forsake it for profit. Matthew Poole said, purchase it upon any terms, spare no pains nor cost to get it. Charles Spurgeon said, buy the truth. That is, be willing at all risks to hold to the truth. Buy it as the martyrs did when they gave their bodies to be burned for it. Buy it as many have done when they have gone to prison for it. And then I like this quote by Spurgeon as well. Sell it not. Sell it not. It cost Christ too dear. Sell it not. You made a good bargain when you bought it. Sell it not. Sell it not. It has not disappointed you. It has satisfied you and made you blessed. Sell it not. You want it. Sell it not. You want it. Or you will want it. The hour of death is coming on. The day of judgment is close upon its heels. Sell it not. You cannot buy its like again. You can never find a better. I think Charles wants us to sell it not. I think that's what he's trying to get across. Charles Bridges said, the Savior says that we should buy from him. This settles the matter. If we do not really want the goods, we will not pay much attention to the proverb, for we only buy what we eagerly desire. We should desire the truth with our whole being. Another verse that talks about the benefit of having righteous children. It says, the father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. You know, it is a blessing when your children do well, when they honor you, when they honor God. It's just a blessing to watch that and observe that in their life. And it brings us delight. It says we will greatly rejoice. One reason for a son or daughter to pursue and gain wisdom is that it will make one's parents glad. It will be an appropriate blessing and reward those who gave the son or daughter life and an upbringing. And then verse 26, 27, and 28 go together. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. Solomon took a lot of time to talk to his son about interfacing, interacting with women, and how he should be righteous in that. And he says, give me thine heart. In other words, don't just listen to me. Now I want you to give me your heart. I want you to put these things in your heart. He understood that wisdom must be received with the heart, not just with the ear, not just with the mind, but with the heart. So that we learn them, and in many cases, memorize them. Wisdom must be received into a willing, given heart. And then he says, let thine eyes observe my ways. You know, sometimes we jokingly say, hey, do as I say, not as I do. Well, Solomon's saying, do as I do. Now, this is a time in Solomon's life where he was following God, and he was telling his son, do as I do. Now, in his later life, maybe not so much. But in this part of his life, he's saying, you know what? Observe what I'm doing, do what I do. Listen to the things that I'm saying. So at least at the point of the time of this writing, Solomon could point to his own life as an example of wisdom when it came to the dangers of an immoral woman. He knew teaching is most effective when it comes from a life that knows and lives wisdom. It talks about this deep ditch. It talks about a narrow pit. And the thinking here is, sometimes you see this on cartoons, but have you ever watched where someone builds a giant pit? Maybe they put some stakes in it with sharp points pointing upward, and then they put a thin surface over the top, just waiting for an animal to come in and fall into the pit. And if you make it deep enough, and if you make the sides steep enough, the animal can't get out. And that's what this is talking about. You may think that you're okay getting into that pit, but you'll never get out. Stay away from that pit is what he's telling his son. And then it talks about how this increases the transgressors among men. So this is not to lay all the blame upon the harlot or the immoral woman, but her trap does capture many. I mean, truthfully, this is a whole law of supply and demand. If there wasn't supply, maybe there wouldn't be demand. If there wasn't demand, maybe there wouldn't be supply. So both sides of this equation need to be aware and turn to God. And then, through the rest of the chapter, we have one of the longest sections of verses that go together in a narrative that we've had probably since chapter 9. And from verse 29 all the way through 35, these are tied together in a theme. And remember, once again, he's talking to his son. He's trying to give him wisdom. And of course, that wisdom is for the ages. That wisdom is good for us today. And so he starts off and he says, who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? So he asks these 6 questions. He says, who is this person? Who does this? And then he answers. He says, they that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red. In other words, when it is strong, when it giveth his color. Some say that means sparkle in the cup. When it moveth itself aright. I couldn't figure out what that meant. Many have said that means moving smoothly down the throat. Don't know if that's what that means, but that's what many commentators have said. When it moveth itself aright. At the last, it biteth like a serpent. Notice the juxtaposition, going smoothly down the throat, but then it biteth like a serpent. It fools you. It stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thy heart shall utter perverse things. In other words, allowing yourself to become intoxicated like this is going to lead you into some of those things that I've talked before. That can be a gateway drug, if you will, for getting into strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. Thou hast stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. Isn't that interesting? When shall I awake? I will seek it again. Hey, I know I'm just going to go after it again. So Solomon's saying, hey, when you get into this condition and you allow alcohol, drugs, strange women, you allow that to control your life, you're going to get to the point where you're going to wish you hadn't been there. You wish you weren't in this pit. But then when you are feeling better, when you're doing better, you're going to seek it out again. You're going to get in this vicious cycle. Proverbs 26:11, one of my favorite verses, it says, as a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. So this is another verse that Solomon's going to use in 3 chapters, but it fits with this theme right here. So he asks all these questions. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Solomon reminded us of many of the ill effects of alcohol and intoxicating drugs. Now, in this case, I don't think he's talking specifically about intoxicating drugs, but of course, in our day and time, that might even be more relevant than the alcohol, because that is obviously a huge blight on our nation. And I heard that somewhere around 100,000 fentanyl deaths a year. 100,000. So they bring woe and sorrow. They bring contentions and complaints. They bring wounds and redness of eyes. Abuse of alcohol and drugs will bring these sorrows to one's life, and countless tragedies prove it. Dwayne Garrett said, this poem is a small masterpiece. It is surely the most effective combination, lampoon and lament over the sorry state of the drunkard. They that linger long at the wine is a picture of those who abuse alcohol or other intoxicants and who are always looking for a stronger drink. It says they go to seek mixed wine. Of course, it doesn't mention this here, but I think today another thing we need to be careful of are even prescription drugs. Those can be abused as well. Be careful. Now, there's probably no more blessed thing than painkillers in the last 100 years. If you need them, they can be a blessing, I can tell you. But be careful. They have a hook. So be careful that you don't allow that hook to get, that you don't get hooked by it. Another quote by Dwayne Garrett, lingering over alcohol describes those who derive comfort and security in knowing that a glass of wine is at hand, ready to deaden the senses. Wine can be pleasing on many levels, and how it looks, how it smells, how it tastes, how it makes one feel. These pleasing aspects of intoxicants never justify their abuse. And it says, at last it biteth like a serpent. It will lure you in. I don't know if you've watched any of these rallies that Trump has, but usually he tells this story about the lady and the snake. And basically, at the end, when the lady gets bit, the snake says, hey, you knew who I was when you took me in. And this verse is saying, you know what? That wine, using these things, it's like a snake. Seems okay at first, but then it will bite you. Like several commentators, Waltke saw, I think his name is John Waltke, saw a deliberate purpose in setting the warning against the seductive woman next to this warning against intoxication. Both the vixen and wine are hidden and deadly traps. And then he says, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea. In other words, someone who drowns. You can drown in this stuff. Be careful. It will take you over, and you'll be like a person on a sinking ship who denies that they're in danger. Living in denial, unable or unwilling to see the danger, their only thought is when they may seek another drink. In the midst of the sea, this phrase notes the temper and condition of the drunkard, the giddiness of his brain, the quietness of his mind, and especially his extreme danger joined with great security. And then it talks about he that lieth at the top of a mast. Um, so, uh, again, John Walke said this escalates his giddiness and danger by comparing him to one sleeping in the crow's nest on top of the rigging where the ship's rocking is the greatest. Now, if you think about it, if you have a ship that's rocking a bit in the water, the most rocking is going to be up at the top on the mast. It's going to rock a whole lot more just because it's got more room to travel. And so it's like they're in the unsafest place that they can. They're trying to sleep in the most unsafe place that they can. So the passage describes more than a night's drinking and a morning's hangover. It describes increasing degenerative effects, physical and mental, of the habitual drinker and the alcoholic. It's a quote by Robert Aitken. And for whatever reason, that didn't trigger my mind who Robert Aitken is. Turns out he was a publisher and a printer around the time of the Revolution, and he was the first one to publish a Bible in the English language in the U.S. And I think it was called the Revolutionary Bible or something like that, because about the time of the Revolutionary War, he was printing these Bibles, and they were going everywhere. And then as I was looking at it, this has now become a real collector's item to find one of these Aitken Bibles. And there are quite a few, because there were a lot of them published in the 1700s. And I noticed that Ron DeSantis, when he took his oath, he was using one of these Aitken's Bibles. So if you come across one of those, you might grab it. It's kind of valuable. Dwayne Garrett said, wine, and in our modern society, illicit drugs brings physical pain and debilitation, exhausts one's resources, takes away mental acuity, and yet leaves one craving for more of the same. And then Charles Bridges, we'll wrap it up with this. Yet there is hope in Jesus for the drunkard and the drug addict. Is anything too hard for the Lord? May his name be praised for a full deliverance from the enslavement to sin, to all sins, and to every individual sin, and even from the chains of this giant sin. The drunkard becomes sober, the unclean holy, the glutton temperate. The love of Christ overpowers the love of sin. All right, so that is chapter 23. I decided not to try to jump into another chapter this morning. Again, pray for Ruth. I'll probably be out with her a couple of weeks. Very, very major surgery. And so I'll be caretaking her for a while. But anybody have a comment, question,